In diplomacy, a single word carries the weight of decades of work. So when Donald Trump took to social media and publicly labeled a vital American ally a hellhole, it sent immediate shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape. The controversy stems from a lengthy letter written by radio host Michael Savage, which Trump officially endorsed and shared. The post aggressively attacks the concept of birthright citizenship, accusing immigrants from India and China of flying to the U.S. solely to exploit American law. The text specifically describes highly educated tech professionals from these nations as gangsters with laptops who are allegedly displacing American workers. Under normal diplomatic protocol, a public insult of this magnitude triggers a swift and severe response. Nations typically summon ambassadors, issue formal letters of protest, or deliver fiery televised rebuttals to defend their national pride. This rhetoric jeopardizes the multi-billion-dollar partnership between the world's two largest democracies, a relationship usually defined by public displays of deep solidarity. You would expect a fiercely proud nation like India to push back hard, but their actual response was completely disarming. When pressed for a reaction, the official spokesperson for India's Ministry of External Affairs delivered a masterclass in deflection. He simply stated, "We have seen reports. That is where I leave it." There were no summoned ambassadors. There was absolutely no outrage, just a quiet, deliberate brush-off. Why would a civilization actively positioning itself as a rising superpower willingly absorb a direct insult without a fight? To understand India's silence, we have to look at the actual target of the social media post. The rhetoric is a calculated domestic political weapon designed to fire up a populist voting base by attacking the 14th Amendment, the legal foundation that guarantees birthright citizenship right ahead of an election cycle. The post attacks chain migration and immigrant families settling in the U.S., despite the fact that the president's own wife, Melania Trump, utilized those exact family sponsorship pathways for her own parents. Furthermore, the claim that Indian immigrants act as gangsters with laptops who bleed the American system dry collapses entirely when exposed to basic financial data. This chart shows the stark reality of the Indian diaspora in the United States. Indian Americans make up a mere 1.5% of the total U.S. population, yet they contribute approximately 6% of all taxes collected nationwide and currently lead 11 different Fortune 500 companies. Look at the innovation sector. In 2024 alone, Indian minds co-founded 72 of the 648 U.S. tech unicorns. That is 11% of the absolute highest-tier startups in the country, completely disproportionate to their population size. Because the gangster rhetoric is entirely disconnected from these economic facts, the Indian government recognizes it for exactly what it is: domestic political theater. Reacting to it would validate a narrative that isn't even about them. But there is a much more pragmatic reason for New Delhi's silence. At the exact moment this post went viral, a 12-member Indian trade delegation was physically sitting in Washington, D.C., engaged in highly sensitive negotiations. India was trapped between a rock and a hard place. Due to heavy global sanctions on Russian oil, India desperately needed the U.S. to grant them leniency and energy waivers to keep their own economy running. Simultaneously, that same delegation was fighting tooth and nail to protect India's domestic agricultural market from aggressive demands by U.S. trade representatives seeking market entry. Taking the bait on social media would have derailed these talks. India executed a cold, calculated move of realpolitik. They temporarily traded away public dignity because an emotional retaliation would have blown up billions of dollars in economic progression. The absence of a formal Indian response created a diplomatic vacuum, one that was filled by an unlikely source. With the Indian government quiet, the official government of Iran seized the opportunity to publicly defend the honor of both India and China. The Iranian consulate issued a formal statement condemning the remarks, pointedly praising India and China as ancient cradles of civilization that deserve global respect. Domestic populist messaging had created a friction point with a major ally, allowing a sanctioned adversary to position itself as a champion of Asian history and dignity. This strategic silence isn't limited to foreign governments. Within the United States, prominent Indian American politicians on the conservative side have entirely avoided condemning the hellhole comments. The political landscape has shifted heavily toward white nationalist messaging. As that rhetoric becomes normalized within the party's platform, the demographic realities of its own minority leaders are quietly swept under the rug. The traditional, global-minded, pro-business wing of the party has been eclipsed. Today, fulfilling the base's demand for anti-immigrant populism takes priority over defending the people who actually build the economy. Trade deals might survive a social media storm, but this rhetoric exposes a severe, long-term strategic vulnerability for the United States. Former U.S. diplomats have bluntly warned that targeting immigrants and attacking strategic partners effectively spits in the faces of the nations America relies on for global stability. American supremacy relies on attracting the best global talent. Actively pushing away top-tier STEM graduates and engineers actively stalls U.S. dominance in artificial intelligence, medicine, and deep tech. A partner nation might swallow its pride to secure a trade waiver today, but weaponizing xenophobia against the brightest minds on Earth will eventually erode the very human infrastructure required to maintain an empire.